guys. Today I wanted to talk about a quote I read in one of my favorite books. It's Jonathan Livingston Seagull. So, this book is about a seagull. His name is Jonathan, and he is somebody who's very imaginative, and he's somebody who's completely frustrated with the daily life of being a seagull. So in his flock, everybody is just preoccupied with survival. They just want to find fish. They want to find scraps of food on fishing trawlers, and that's about it. That's all their life is about. But Jonathan wanted to explore more, and he wanted to discover how to fly and fly in better ways. So as in, he wanted to fly faster. He wanted to do different kinds of acrobatics in the air. He wanted to do different things with it, and eventually he succeeded, and he also succeeded in bringing a lot of people into a lot of seagulls into like his system of flight. And eventually, then, as the story progresses, it becomes a religion, and then there's a lot of religious doctrine associated with it, and Jonathan becomes something like a godly figure. And then younger seagulls, they reject the religion, but then they try to fly in the way that Jonathan had showed them. So it's a very lovely book. I just want to talk about a quote that I read in that book, and the quote is don't believe what you see with your eyes, look with your understanding, find out what you already know, and then you will see the way to fly. So, as I was reading this quote today, the thing that really came to my mind was that he's talking about imagination. Simple as that. He's talking about how important it is to see beyond what we can physically see with our eyes. Right? It's all about imagination. So, one thing that I realized, this is the one thing, imagination is the one thing that is so lacking in our current education system. And that makes me so sad, because it's one of the most important skills you need in almost any field. You need imagination in science, you need imagination in politics, you need imagination to live a happy life. Because if you can't imagine things in a better way, if you can't see a better world, if you can't imagine something that does not exist, then where is the room for creativity? Where is the room for fun? Where is the room for passion in your life? And our education system has become nothing more than a competition. There are coaching centers everywhere, there are like tuitions everywhere. Everybody is like fully focused on getting children to learn NCRT and then writing what they've learned in their exams and getting good marks. But where is the focus on creativity, on imagination? And this is something that's especially lacking today when we look at online classes. Like education is becoming digitalized, and I agree that that's a great move. That makes education accessible to a lot more people, and that's wonderful. But if you are able to see animations of everything, then where is room for your brain to create pictures on its own? Our children don't have room, our children don't have space to practice visualization. Like when I was in school and we had to study about, let's say, atoms, to a certain extent, when we were in the classroom, we had to picture it, when we were smaller. But then as we grew older, after like class 9 or so, we had educom classes. And then they had all these like amazing videos with like, the atoms and how it's like it resembles like the solar system, how the molecules come together and all of that. So we had very lovely videos about it, but then that took away the need for imagination, that completely took away the element of visualization. Similarly, like when books are made into movies, when you read a book, you get to imagine what's going on in the room. Like the writer isn't going to tell you every minute detail of what's happening. You have to imagine the scene. You have to fill it with colors. And that's the fun of reading a book. But, when it gets converted into a movie, there is no room for doing any of that. It's just, you have the images in front of you. You have the digital images in front of you. You don't need to think about it. You don't need to imagine anything. And I think that is one reason why, like, the current generation of children who are still in school, they struggle with imagination. They struggle with, like, reading between the lines. So these were skills that you need it to be able to survive the education system, because these were skills that you needed when you studied science, when you studied English, anything you studied, you had to imagine. But now children don't need to do that anymore, and that element of imagination has completely been taken away from the entire system of education. And I feel we're doing our children a great disservice by doing so. So, even while formal education focuses more on the syllabus and more on NCRT, I think it's our responsibility as parents and caregivers to ensure that our children also have opportunities to actively imagine things, to actively daydream. That's a very important part of developing emotional intelligence, of developing your imagination, your visualization skills. So I feel like the best way to encourage children to dream or encourage them to visualize things is to get them to read books. And I can understand that it's a little difficult to get children to read books when there are more interesting graphics on their phones or on their tabs, but it's very important to get them to read actually. And I'm not saying you have to give them a physical book, get them to read on Kindle, get them to read on their tab, but reading as a habit is extremely important, because that's the only way we have left to encourage imagination in children. And if children don't learn to imagine things when they are young, I can't think what it's gonna be like when they've grown older. Because somebody who doesn't imagine is it's very easy for them to accept things exactly the way they seem to be. If you are not somebody who's good at imagining things, you cannot imagine a better world, you cannot imagine a better life, you cannot imagine that things can be done in a better way than they're already being done. So then there is no room for creativity, there's no room for improvement. And if that is the kind of future we are heading towards, where our children are going to grow up into a bunch of adults who just are unable to think beyond what they can physically see, that's a terrible future. And that is not something we want. And that's why I think it's very important for us to get our children to join libraries, to join book clubs, to get them to read. Because reading is that one habit that's going to pay off in their academics and also in life. And I believe it's a habit that's going to pay off more than their formal education. Formal education will give them a degree, but it won't teach them to live. But reading will teach them to live. So I hope that as caregivers, as parents, I hope that we can take this very seriously and ensure that our children are getting ample opportunities to indulge their imagination and not just their cognitive skills or their memorizing skills. So I hope everybody thinks about it, because it's an important issue and it's something that's worth addressing. And I feel like we owe it to our children to make sure that they have a childhood where imagination plays a key role.